Good morning. My name is Jim Ryan, and I am the Dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Education. I will make one quick clarification. I realize, as I'm sure all of you do, that I am not Fareed Zakaria. And I'm as disappointed as you that he was unfortunately unable to make it today. I cannot hope to fill his shoes, but I will do my best to moderate a lively discussion on the role of the teacher in society. But before we get to that topic, I want to just say a quick word of thanks to the Varkey Foundation for organizing this conference and for inviting the Harvard Graduate School of Education to help co-sponsor it. We've had a great time engaging in this topic and have welcomed the opportunity to help shape the conference. And I want to thank all of those who have been involved in bringing this to life, and a special word of thanks to my colleague Fernando Reimers, who's a professor at the Ed School and an expert on global education. So I think all of those who've been involved in the conference deserve a round of applause. So we are all gathered here today in the common belief that education is the key issue facing our own countries and indeed the entire world. It's often said in the United States that education is the civil rights issue of our time. And I believe that's true, but I also believe that it is the economic prosperity issue of our time and the national security issue of our time, and indeed the global prosperity and peace issue of our time. As Sonny Varkey has often said, and he deserves a special note of thanks for organizing and putting together this conference. As he's often said, it's through education that we can alleviate poverty, that we can reduce inequality, that we can promote sustainable development, peace, empowerment, and democracy. And if education is a key issue of our time, perhaps the most key issue within education are teachers. It's widely known that teachers are the single most important in-school factor associated with student outcomes and success. And yet teachers are under a great deal of pressure, if not under siege, being asked to take on more roles, being held accountable for the results of their students, leading some to think that we're asking teachers to do much, while others believe that teachers are not doing enough. There's a fairly widespread consensus that, at least in the US and in some other countries, we're not doing enough to attract the best and brightest students into teaching. We're not doing a good enough job to prepare them to become teachers, and we're not offering them enough professional development once they've become teachers in order to maintain success. In addition, the status of the teaching profession itself is quite mixed. In some countries, teachers are revered. In many other countries, teachers are not afforded the respect that they deserve. Luckily, we have a panel of experts to discuss these and other issues, and I want to introduce them briefly before posing the questions. Starting to my left is Vedran Mornar, who is the Minister of Science, Education, and Sports of the Republic of Croatia. Next is Esteban Bullrich, Minister for Education of Buenos Aires in Argentina. Geoffrey, Canada, President of the Harlem Children's Zone and the Promise Academy Boards, and I'll say an esteemed graduate of the Harvard Graduate School of Education. John Bangs, Senior Consultant to the General Secretary of Education International in the UK. And finally, Jacqueline Jumbe-Kahura, who is a teacher at the Bofa Primary School in Kilifi, Kenya, and one of the 10 finalists for the Global Teacher Prize. What I would like to do is organize the conversation around three central questions. The first, what makes for an effective teacher? What are the qualities associated with effective teaching, and how do we know effective teaching when we see it? Are there universals, or is it context specific? Second, how do we attract and retain effective teachers? And third, how do we elevate the status of the teaching profession? Along the way, I hope we'll get into topics including unions, teacher pay, accountability, technology, and autonomy. What I'd like to do is, with the first question, starting with my left, have each of the panelists answer it, and then in the second two questions, I'll open it up for panelists to volunteer, and I've asked them to respond not just to the questions, but to each other, to focus on solutions, and not be afraid to disagree. So here goes, starting with Vedran. So what makes for an effective teacher in your view, and how do we know when we see one?
I think the passion, the love for the profession is the key. It must be a person who didn't enroll teaching because he or she did not succeed in engineering. In my country, it's usually the case. You have the major, which is called mathematics for engineers, and then there is a major mathematics for teachers. And if you are not good enough to go into mathematics for engineers, then you're all mathematics for teachers. Of course, engineering is paid better. You can get the job in a bank, which is, of course, a lucrative profession, and teaching professor is not. Money is, of course, the source of all evils, I would say. And if we can get more money for education, we could attract brighter young people. This must be a person who really loves children. This must be a person who works for pleasure, not for money. And that must be a person who uses technology but balances. Misuse of the technology, there are some people, I used to call them slide readers, use PowerPoint presentation and just press page down, page down, page down. This is dull, this is not inspirational, and of course the results are very, very, very bad. So if we can find people who are here because they want, not because they must, because that was the other option, if we attract more people and make the profession more attractive, we will talk about that later, I think we will have more effective teachers.
Terrific. So, Esteban, Vedran thinks part of the key to being an effective teacher is passion. What else?
I would ask the audience to do a small exercise and close your eyes for a second. Close your eyes. Don't sleep, but and think of which was the most impactful teacher you had and the capacities and qualities that that teacher had. I do that exercise all the time, being in charge of 50,000 teachers in the city, because I think the qualities we need in that teacher are the qualities that I see in the teacher that was most impactful in my life. A true believer. We really need people that believe the children can learn. Andreas was saying about how this difference between countries where headmasters or teachers really don't think their kids can learn because they come from bad social economic background. So we need true believers as teachers. We need motivated motivators. We need people that are able to challenge kids, to motivate them to learn. They have to have those social skills. We need people that dream. We need dreamers in front of classrooms. We need people that really believe that the world is a better place because those kids are learning what they need to do to learn to make our world a better place. We need people that are passionate about teaching, right? Because they need to train more and more. They need to learn more new skills and upgrade those skills all the time. So the question, as Vikas was saying and Jim was saying, is what is the solution to get those people into the classrooms? Why aren't we getting all those people into the classrooms? And one of the things is going to be criticizing my profession. I think politicians have a lot to do with the fact that we are not getting the passionate teachers into the classrooms, especially in public schools. Because we choose not to reform schools. Because also, as Andreas was saying before, we are comfortable without challenging the education system. We see evolution in education, but not in big schools, in big systems. We see it in small individual schools. I think we need to make for a much better, innovative workplace for the teachers. We need to change the school system. We need to really challenge the way we look at teachers. Not as union members, which is what we politicians do. We need to see them as the people that are in charge of making our country, our city, a better place for the future. And the truth is, the only way to do that is to make changes into our systems. We are asking teachers to take kids to the moon, but we're only upgrading a car instead of building a rocket. We're comfortable upgrading the car. We're very uncomfortable about building a rocket because we don't understand rocket science. We don't understand teaching. So I think the most effective teachers are those that have the human qualities of passion, of motivation, of believing that the world can be a better place inside the classroom.
Geoffrey?
Thank you. So first of all, I absolutely agree with the other two panelists, and I want to say a couple of additional things. A deep knowledge of the subject area you're teaching really matters. If you're teaching in the primary grades and you've never taken a class or a course on how to teach reading, and yet you're supposed to be helping children learn how to read, then that just doesn't make a lot of sense. A lot of our, I think, focus on education is not really preparing folks for the developmental levels that they're going to be teaching. There's a huge difference in teaching a 6-year-old versus teaching a 10-year-old. And if you haven't really thought about that, that's going to have an impact on you. The second thing is, you know, I work with really poor kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, and you need a really different set of skills in working in that population. I tell a lot of folks, if you're going to come to Harlem and work in my schools, you don't need just sort of this deep knowledge about your subject, but you actually have to be able to deal with behavior problems. And if you've never dealt with that, then you're going to struggle. In my school, you might do perfectly well in another school, but in my schools, you're going to struggle. It would help if you like and respect the children that you're working with. Right? It would just help as a teacher. Folks who have preconceived ideas about the abilities of certain people, they really aren't great teachers in certain communities. And I think this idea that you need to be prepared to believe deeply in the abilities of your young people is something that we undervalue. Let me say two other things. Teaching, really good teaching, takes a certain amount of stamina, right? Because you are on all day with those kids. And if you're the kind of person who doesn't have the physical and emotional and psychic energy to share with 20, 25, 30 folks on a daily basis, teaching is probably not the right profession for you. There are probably other things you could do. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, but you probably don't want to be a teacher if by 11 o'clock you don't like kids anymore, right? That's probably going to be a problem. The last thing I want to say is that the payoff for good teaching is something that is not rewarded. The way our businesses are run, you get the biggest payoff when you stop teaching, when you become a principal or a dean or you retire. But while you are teaching inside the classroom, in most cases you're at the bottom of the education totem pole, and that's an absolute disgrace. Because what it does is it really sort of motivates the best and the brightest to get out of the classroom and get some prestige and some extra money and some other things. And so I think part of the problem is that we're pushing teachers into other arenas. I said that was the last thing, but it's not. One last thing. We have this huge attrition rate in teaching. We're not choosing people who are going to stay, and it's costing us a fortune to constantly retrain folks because they teach for a year or two and they leave, and we're constantly have this revolving door. And so we need to do a better job of making sure that folk who come into the profession actually are committed to this and understand that you're not going to do your best teaching until you've got about 3 years in the field, and we're losing 20–25% of our teachers before they reach their best. So those are just some of the ideas.
Good, and that touches on the last issue touches on how we retain teachers, so we'll come back to that in the second round of questions. So John, we now have heard about passion, about belief in kids, about deep knowledge of subject matter, and stamina. What else makes for an effective teacher?
Yeah, this is about answering the examination question, isn't it? I've always thought that actors have it easy. What teachers are expected to do is to teach more than 5 hours a day, write their own scripts and be responsible for it, to the most demanding audience in the world. I mean, you know, if you're an actor, you can just go on the stage, you've got a script for you, all you have to do is interpret, and usually the audience is with you before you start. So I think there's something that we need to have in terms of teachers and put them in perspective. And it's also worth knowing, actually, and I did a survey when I was head of education at the National Union of Teachers on why young people went into teaching, and they do it not because of the long vacations. They do it, as Geoffrey said, to make a positive difference to children's lives. And it seems to me that what we have to do is to hold on to that vocational optimism and commitment to children and understand that that's why the vast majority of teachers went into teaching. To answer your question, and this is where, again, I agree with Geoffrey, yes, subject knowledge, yes, knowing how to engage with pedagogy, yes, being at the edge of your game when it comes to teaching and learning, but also having an emotional intelligence and emotional empathy in relation to children and young people. That actually is underestimated as a core characteristic and ought to be focused on. I was taken with Geoffrey's point about teachers being at the bottom of the pile. I wish I'd been able to watch Andres. The feed to the television screen in the speaker's room went down, so I didn't hear what he actually said. So I went over to see Barnett Berry to find out what he said. There's some really interesting evidence that's come out from the OECD, but not only the OECD. And that is that there is a direct connection between the collective self-efficacy of the teaching profession, valuing teachers, a society valuing teachers, and the educational success of the education system. In short, unless you have the teaching profession with a very high level of self-efficacy, you will not get educational success in your system. Now, that has massive policy implications. And this is where I'm going to dip my toe into controversial territory just as a taster, Jim. And that is, you're going to have to get over the fact that teacher unions are teachers' choice. And the most unionized workforce in the world is the teaching profession. The most unionized. And you have to ask yourself why. Because teachers want to own their own profession through their unions. Now, the challenge then is, for governments and for employers, is what is your pluralistic relationship with teacher unions? And how can you make that positive rather than a dogfight? So I'll leave it at that, Jim.
We will come back to the teacher.
I had no doubt.
Yes. All right, Jackie, you are a highly effective teacher, so maybe you could just tell us what makes you so effective.
For me, an effective teacher is one, first and foremost, who has chosen to find true happiness in his or her profession. So that is the beginning point, that as a teacher, one must endeavor to find true happiness, because probably within that profession, there could be a number of limitations. So until you find the spaces within that profession to find that true happiness, then it will probably be extremely difficult to help the children to excel in class and outside class. So as a teacher, of course, one has the curriculum that he or she has to cover with the children or with the learners in order for those learners to excel in the classroom. But for an effective teacher to be able to inspire the children not just to excel in class, but also to excel in the society, but by being able to apply the knowledge and skills that they have learned in class to be able to resolve the everyday problems that affect them and affect the society. I think, to me, that is an effective teacher. There are things that definitely a teacher would find in the curriculum, but there are things that they will not find in the curriculum. And those things include propagating good virtues to the learners. Virtues like humility, respect, caring for one another, being accommodative. Those are things that a teacher would not find in the curriculum. But if he or she is able to have the learners appreciate that for one to function effectively, one must be able to excel beyond the classroom and be able to belong to that global community, then to me that's an effective teacher.
Terrific. So I think we have some agreement about the qualities of effective teachers, beginning with passion and dedication and belief in children, knowledge of the subject matter, also knowledge and empathy of the kids, stamina, those who really choose teaching not for monetary reward, but for the rewards that come from teaching itself, and those who are willing not only to work to the child's academic success, but success beyond the classroom. So we know what we're looking for. How do we find it? How do we attract and retain effective teachers? And this one I'll open up to anyone who would like to go first.
So let me maybe just start with part of the problem, I think, in the teaching profession and attracting and retaining quality teachers. You know, in the US, if you want to enter a field where you are paid as much as the worst person in that field, right? So, I mean, just figure out who is really lousy, and you're going to make exactly the same thing, then go into teaching. I mean, that's not a great, attractive, I think, opportunity for young people. So one of the issues, folks who really believe deeply that I am talented, I am smart, I want to go out and have a good career, but I also want to have a good life, I want to be able to buy a house, send my kids to college, they're not thinking maybe teaching is the right profession for me. I think we underpay teachers. This is different than whether or not we should hold teachers accountable for performance. I think we absolutely should, but I think we should pay them as if it's a profession, a full-time profession, and then we should treat it like a full-time profession. The other thing is there's this huge, I think, belief that the best and the brightest go into business, they go into law, they go into medicine, they do not go into teaching. And that's a real problem. When I was an undergraduate, I went to a small liberal arts school. My senior year, I took a couple of pure science classes, and I received A's in those classes. And the professors came to me and said, "You're smart." And I said, fine. They said, "But why would you go into teaching?" I mean, just why? So they talked me into going into medicine because they said, you can't waste that good mind on teaching. You could really do something important with your life. And I know. And I was going in to be a doctor, and I had to take a couple of extra classes when it suddenly hit me, I don't like sick people. Why would I become a doctor, right? So this idea, right? But you have to understand, I was 22 years old.
Right.
I was a kid, and the adults were telling me this profession does not need folk who are really smart and really talented. You could do something better with your life. So I think that's a problem. I think we have to begin to use the regular kinds of things that we use for all the other professions. Salary, that we've got to make sure that there's prestige. If anyone can become a teacher, then what's the big deal? We need standards that say only if you're able to do these kind of things can you become a teacher, so that you begin to attract folk who really have this belief that talent matters, and my talent in particular can make a difference.
So Geoffrey believes that a key part of this is pay and prestige.
Yeah, I would agree with Geoffrey. Two things that I think that are very important. First one is, he mentioned it in the introduction, is the fact that teachers come into the profession and have to leave the classroom to earn better money. And we face that problem in the city by creating teacher of teachers chart. So you can really grow significantly in your income as a teacher, staying in the classroom, and using some of your time, we pay for that extra time, teaching other teachers, become better teachers. And I think that's a way to show them that we care that they are good teachers. Because one of the biggest problems we have is society doesn't believe teaching is a good profession anymore. I mean, doctors are much better seen and perceived in society than teachers. The truth is, a more educated society needs less doctors. Health is related to education. So why aren't we doing something about it?
It's true.
And the truth is because leadership is not talking about education. Politicians, we are not talking about education because we don't understand it. We want to have a good relationship with the unions, as John was saying before, and that's it. A good minister is one that doesn't have any strikes, at least in Argentina. Yeah? So if I don't have any strikes, I'm a good minister. Truth is, what am I doing not to have any strikes? The city of Buenos Aires is the only state, because we're a city-state in Argentina, that for 3 years in a row, we didn't have any strikes. You know what are the things I did not to have any strikes? My wife didn't agree with this solution that I proposed. I gave my phone number to every single teacher in the city, 50,000 teachers. They would call me 2 a.m. in the morning, asking for their salary, problems in the classroom, problems with the ceiling, problems with the blackboard, whatever. But I answered every single call. And you know what? They truly believe now that we care about them, that we care what they are doing is important for us. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons we don't have any strikes. We have a good relationship with the unions. We've been able to do a lot of changes, innovative changes, to give back some of the prestige that the teacher profession has, but we're still far, far away because society still doesn't believe that we need to learn more, that we need to have a better education as a way to progress. A doctor is still more valuable than a teacher.
I mean, the thing I would say and add to that, actually, and pick up the other issues later on, is the best promoter of teaching is the profession itself. And if you have a profession that's self-confident, if it's enormously attractive, if in a country like Finland, you've got a huge number of people wanting to apply to be teachers, that they know, I think as Geoffrey indicated, that the teaching profession is of equal importance and equal status to the other professions, then it will be teachers who will be saying that. And that's the big deal. And I am a profound believer in seeing the teaching profession as a national corporate entity, connected with the rest of the world, incidentally. In fact, what really gets young teachers' juices going is sustainable development, connections with teachers in other countries, for example. So the important policy question for governments is how do you grow and provide the conditions for having a teaching profession which talks to each other, teachers who talk to each other within that, and the sites for debate? How do you grow that and provide the conditions in a country? Those are the big policy questions.
And how do you?
Well, I think what you do is that you have to have a partnership with teachers' own organizations, whether they're unions or any other organization. You have to understand that no educational reform is going to be embedded unless you have that partnership. That as soon as a dynamic minister who imposes reforms on the teaching profession disappears, you can kiss goodbye to the reforms as well. That's the big issue. It may be tough, It may stretch the definition of pluralism to the nth degree in terms of the debate, the hot debates that you have, but there isn't an alternative. You can only have educational reforms which improve teachers if you work with the organizations representing teachers. That's the only way you can do it.
I think for me also, I think there are a lot of voices of many teachers out there that still remain unheard. And personally, I also appreciate that there are many teachers out there who are also working under very difficult circumstances. They don't have the spaces to share the differences or the difference they are making in the lives of many children and in the society. So if we could create those spaces by investing in teachers and creating the spaces for the teachers themselves to share with each other the different critical stories of change or the differences they are making in the lives of their children and that of the society. And appreciating that they have this valuable and significant role they are playing in the society. I think they would feel valued. But a lot of those spaces are not there. And they would wish to be heard. But the avenues to get heard, of course, come with several limitations, of course, depending on where many of these teachers are working. So I think if teachers can also learn from each other, teachers can feel appreciated by, from the little and small and big things they do in the lives of children or learners and the community, I think we can retain a number of good teachers.
Absolutely.
Okay. We have heard in two cases comparison between doctors and teachers. Does anybody in this room know any teacher who earns hundreds of thousands of dollars per year? I don't. Maybe this is the reason why medicine is more attractive. Maybe it is good, because I personally would not want to go to underpaid doctor, the doctor who receives the lowest salary in the society. Unfortunately, sometimes teachers are below the average salary. In my country, unfortunately, it is the case. Teachers on the primary school level are paid less than average salary in the country. So there is an easy answer on how to attract brightest people to teaching profession. Give them unlimited salary. But only that would not solve the problem. You have to have the stick and the carrot. You have to abandon unions completely, because they would protect even those who don't work as they should for that big salary. You have to have means to say, you are not good, you are fired. I, as a minister, my school principals don't have that means, don't have that power to say, you are fired. Because then there are unions who would protect. And from time to time, I think that the unions are here just to protect those who do not want to work. On the other hand, there is another mean to attract the brightest, not the brightest, but good people into teaching profession. Give them dignity, which sometimes they don't have. I think that everybody in this room knows about this cartoon which compares 1969 and 2000 and some, where parents in 1969 yell at their children, what kind of grades are these? And in 2000 and something, they yell at the teacher. We must change them, change the situation. In daily newspapers, you would very seldomly read about good cases in teaching profession, that there is a bright teacher, that there is a teacher who had success, who won some prizes on a competition internationally or nationally. But if some bad thing happened in the school, if a teacher was beaten by the parent who was not satisfied with the grades, This you will most certainly find in the newspapers. If we change that attitude, if we cover those bad things, and if we stress important, if we, maybe the propaganda is the right word, if we use some kind of positive propaganda, if we make a positive aura around the teacher and the teacher's profession, then we are one step ahead.
And can I just say one thing on this issue? Because, and I'm probably going to get in trouble from my left and right on this. So let me. We have a problem with the unions that goes like this, and it's not. I'm not against teachers' unions. I'm not against unions in general, but the unions have been spectacularly ineffective in doing the one thing they should do, which is raise teachers' salary and raise their pay. So
They've been effective or
they have
ineffective?
not been effective. So since they can't do that, what they have been very effective at is making sure teachers work as little as possible and that they can't be fired, right? So they've traded off this ability, right, to deal with quality for the fact that they can't get any more money. So when you go to negotiate, and politicians have been perfectly happy with this deal, right? I'm not going to give you any more money, but I'll give you 2 more days off, even though there is no evidence that that's going to help children whatsoever, right? So you've got 2 sides who are in collaboration, right? We're not getting more money, and we're going to basically screw the kids. I'm sorry. This is the current deal, right? And the unions are not fighting for the kinds of things that are going to actually help children. They're not coming in and saying, we have these innovative programs, we're going to make. What they're fighting over is, in that contract, what else can they grab for the teachers, which usually has nothing to do with student achievement. And I think you've got this dual problem of politicians making these deals, of union leaders making these deals, and what it has convinced the public is money does not matter. And that is not true. But if you have no way of sort of allowing the profession to demonstrate why quality matters, because no one's rewarding that, you end up with a system that people feel like a dollar invested in this is not going to produce anything. Why give them more money? And so I think it's on both sides of the equation. We have to be honest about this issue.
Can I come in?
I think you've provoked some response.
No. I mean, I've got to give it to Geoffrey. He's raised the temperature, which is what he's supposed to do. I'm not going to comment on the individual circumstances that Geoffrey's experienced, apart from saying that I don't recognize the false contradictions that you put up, Geoffrey. The fact of the matter is, as I say, the vast majority of unions across the world, teacher unions, involve the voluntary payment by teachers of union subscriptions, not the compulsory payment, the voluntary payment. So they are committed. And what they expect from their union is protection, promotion, and provision, i.e. provision of quality professional development. Now, I could go on forever about how unions could improve, like school principals or anyone else could improve. There is always improvement in the system. But what I would say is that the paradigm that somehow unions are in cahoots with politicians to actually conspire against kids' achievement is not something that I recognize in any union that I'm related to in terms of Education International. It doesn't operate like that. What I do find from union leaders, and scratch them and see, is if you, as a government leader, or if you as an employees leader offer partnership to unions and say, how can we work this out together? More often than not, union leaders are absolutely up for that and will work with you. The biggest problem in those circumstances always is sometimes you get what you wish for. And actually then you have to follow that through. And it's always difficult. But as I said before, there's absolutely no substitute for that relationship. And going on about how unions actually get, I accept, Geoffrey, that you're not against unions per se, and that circumstances you've come across have obviously led to the rise in temperature in this debate. But actually, by and large, nothing is ever easy, but it is worth working for. And as I say, in every experience I've had where a government has said, look, let's work together, let's actually follow this through. It may be bumpy, it may be rocky, it may be tough, but it certainly is worth it.
So Esteban, the view
Yeah,
from
well,
Buenos Aires.
this is going to be painful for Geoffrey because I'm going to agree with the unions as a politician. So. Now, what I want to say is two things. I think the basic problem we have, and I think John touched on it at the beginning, is that there is a lack of trust between unions and politicians. I mean, and this has been growing and growing and growing, maybe because of bad experience, and then there's prejudice. And in Argentina, and this is only, I'm going to talk only about Argentina, education ministers last very little. You know, there is a lot of rotation in education ministers, so there is no build-up of a relationship between the government and the unions. I've been the minister for 6 years now, 5.5. I'm the longest-running minister in the history of democracy in the city. And I think we've been able to stop strikes, doing a lot of reform, evaluating standards. We have created an evaluation institution that evaluates teachers, not only students, also teachers every year. We do universal evaluation of teachers and also of policies, because we have to evaluate ourselves too. And I agree with John. I think there is a room for improvement if we put kids in the center. I mean, what we said is what we care is that these results improve. I've been working with the OECD. We've been, as a city, we signed up for PISA as an independent evaluation. And we were working with them, trying to create our own standards in the city, but working with the unions and the teachers. I think we need to build that trust, because it's the only way to really do deep reforms. We are now have teacher exchange programs. We are sending teachers to Sweden. We're sending teachers to the US. We're sending teachers to different countries in the world so they get this global exposure that also John was talking before. I think they need it. But this came out from an agreement because we were able to build trust between the two parties. And I think that's something that has to be there, and that's a huge solution to one of the biggest problems we have, which is the confrontation between governments and teacher unions.
So I want to turn to the question of, which we've touched on a little bit, elevating the status of the profession. So teacher pay has been mentioned, teacher unions have been mentioned. We all on this panel would agree that teachers are incredibly important. I think everyone in the room would agree, and that their importance is not fully recognized. So how do we change that? If part of the way to attract talented people into teaching is to raise pay, how do we make the argument? How do we bring teachers up in the eyes of politicians, in the eyes of community members, so that they are afforded the same sort of respect that a doctor would be afforded?
I think...
Let's start with Jackie.
Okay. For me, again, as I said, it's investing in the teacher in terms of knowledge and skills. That is, the teacher is able to improve their knowledge and skills and access to information, and their voices get heard so that they're able to impart the same knowledge to the learners, and they're able to prepare these learners to function effectively in the society. I think one of the things I also wanted to say about the teachers' union, of course, they play a very critical role in defending the rights and interests of the teachers. And many a times, of course, you'll find the teachers' unions and the government probably pulling in different directions. However, if at one point, or if they can also find a way of agreeing on a few things that they're not seen to be pulling in different directions, but they are agreeing in principle that they are all there to serve the interests of the teachers and by extension the learners, then I think we can have, we can also raise that status of the teaching profession.
One of the interesting little notes in the briefing notes for this particular panel was the question about professional councils for teachers, national professional councils for teachers. And that is an ongoing debate in a number of countries, actually. A number of countries do have professional councils. Classic one is Scotland, actually. They've got a professional council which has independently elected teachers. The teaching profession elects them. They've got a good relationship with the Educational Institute of Scotland. And in fact, in Wales as well, in Northern Ireland and in Ireland itself, there are councils that are responsible for providing funds and start-up initiatives for professional development and teacher learning. But it's a tricky one. But I do think that the most important thing for teachers, and to answer your question directly, Jim, about status and all the rest of it, is that there is an argument and there is a debate about whether there should be professional councils and what they should consist of, and what the relationship of those councils is to unions. All I can say is this: you won't get a professional council with buy-in unless you ask teachers themselves, unless, for instance, the ability and the seed cord funding is available so that you can survey teachers and start a debate. And I think that's an enormous opportunity for teachers' own organisations. I think it should be teachers' own organisations that should be an integral part of that professional council, not exclusively. I think teachers need to be on it as well. And I think the focus should be, for example, on creating a pedagogic bank for teachers, teachers able to share practice nationally, to moderate practice nationally, to also, for that to provide and kite mark quality professional development, for teachers' own organisations to provide professional development, for example. I think the possibilities of that central organisation serving teachers and their organisations is limitless.
What about accountability for results? Do you think that teachers have to accept accountability for student performance if they are going to warrant additional pay, or if the status of the profession is going to be elevated?
I mean,
Go ahead, Esteban. I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. And this is how I think we get at this question about how do we change the current sort of dynamics in education. One is, I think that both for the unions and for our political leadership, we need to start over. We need to start really saying this is what it would take in our cities and our states to actually educate a child. And after we do that, we should put a budget behind it instead of the other way around. I think that the debate, and the reason people think I don't like unions, which is not the issue, is that they have been narrowly focused on a set of issues which doesn't have the child at the center. And I know all teachers want the child at the center of that, but we haven't had the ability to go in and say, what is it really going to take to make sure that child gets a quality education? That's the first thing. And I think teachers' voices in that are absolutely critical because they absolutely know. But this idea that teachers should not have a set of accountability, that they're held to a set of accountability standards, to me is an absolute disgrace to the field. We absolutely need standards, and we have to hold people to standards, and we have to accept the fact that not everybody is going to be prepared to meet those standards, and therefore we can't have a situation which occurs in the States. I'm not going to talk about any place else in the world. Maybe they're all different, but in the States, we end up sending the worst teachers to the poorest schools. Right? And that just deprives those kids any opportunity to actually compete in a global economy. And I think that without standards and the ability to say, you know what, you're a great person, but this isn't the right profession for you, if we have no ability to do that, we're going to keep having the poorest teachers in the most underserved schools, which is just going to perpetuate the inequalities we have right now in our country.
I want to add something. I agree with Geoffrey on this, but I want to say one thing that I think it's a little bit of a disagreement. Good. Again, is that politicians don't have kids at the center of their goals either, because they don't vote.
Yep.
So the truth is, they are happy with the unions not having the kids as a center either. That's why there is no communion. Because to invest as a politician in education, you really have to believe, as the Barkey Foundation saying says, that you can really change life through education. And the truth is, most politicians won't. That's the reason there is no agreement. And I think there is room for agreement if you change that. And I think to elevate teacher profession is doing the effort. I mean, I traveled 16 hours to come here and talk about education. There is no forum like this one in Latin America. So I had to come here, invited by the Barkey Foundation, to see the effort they are doing in putting the teacher as a global award in the center of the discussion. And that's what we need to do as politicians. But we need to do it thinking that the kids are the center of the discussion, not the teachers. Teachers are the best element we have to work in improving those kids' lives. But we need to believe that that's our goal as politicians. And I think that's not true for all the politicians in the world. I would say that's true only for a minority of politicians. And that's what needs to change. Because if society doesn't see politicians talking about teachers and education, they won't talk about teachers and education. Unfortunately, we are a bad example in that sense. So I really believe efforts like this, about talking about education, talking about teaching, awarding a global teacher for its efforts of changing lives, a huge award, I think that's a way to go. But we need to accept that we are not putting kids at the center of our goals as politicians also.
Maybe also the continuity of the ministers of education could do some good. I congratulate you on being in the post for 6 years. This is a rare case. It's longer than any minister in my country. I'm in my position. I've been in my position now for 8 months. I'm a replacement of previous minister. Unfortunately, and it often happens that when next party comes into the power, whatever the previous one did was wrong. We have to do it from scratch. We have to change because nothing was good. We have better ideas. And then again, the party in the power changes, and then the new one has these previous ideas which have to be reinstated, and so on. But if we ensure that there is a continuity, if we see that education is beyond any political interest, if we see that education is more important than politics, we can succeed. If we educate our teachers better, if we give them some kind of autonomy, if we ease them from the burden of menial administrative work, if we give them more flexible curricula, if we make the curriculum more interesting. In my country, the curricula hasn't changed for 20 years or so. If we make it more modern, if we introduce technology, if we introduce tablets, if we do something as Turkey does, like Fatih project, buying the tablet for every teacher. By the way, I learned in Turkey one very interesting way of stimulating teachers to do better. If you are performing better, you will be assigned a better town. If you don't work good, then you can be sent to a remote place in the mountains, and maybe this teaches you a lesson. So again, maybe not always the money is not always the money is only means of stimulating. There are other means. But you just have to have power, you have to have continuity, you have to be smart.
So we're coming to the close of the panel. I'll end with this observation, which I think is common among all the panelists. I think one of the most important things we can do to elevate the prestige and the status of the profession is not only have the opportunity to differentiate and find a way to move along those who are not adequate at teaching, but also to celebrate those who are truly great. And so one of the reasons why I think the Global Teacher Prize is such an effective tool is that it shines a spotlight on truly great teachers. And I think that it puts, that spotlight alone will do an enormous amount of good in terms of identifying those who are truly gifted and who have changed hundreds, if not thousands, of lives. And so we're going to close this panel now because I think there's going to be an opportunity to meet the finalists soon. But for now, please join me in thanking all of the panelists.